she stopped the presentation and humiliated me, started yelling, raising her voice. In the meantime, I had like 5 more minutes to get ready to present this exact presentation to our director. And I had to pull it together, wiped away all my tears. Here I am, like puffy-eyed, a little bit of like glossy eyes, a little bit red from crying. I had to pull myself together and walk into the same room. So I remembered I was listening to my gut and I was like, this isn't right. I'm going to stand up for myself. Growing up, I remembered being this little kid that was full of life, had so much energy. I would be running around the house, making up my own songs and playing all these little characters. Like my parents have these home videos of me just singing and dancing and just coming up with all these things. But for some reason, outside of the house, I remembered being the complete opposite, where when I was at school or when I was even in the playground, I would be completely withdrawn, really shy and really quiet. And I felt like I was afraid of the world. I was taught to fear the world and be cautious of others. And that led to 15 years of me being this quiet, shy kid. But whenever I was at home, I was just this loud, extroverted kid with so many fun ideas and just silly. And I am an Asian American female, so my parents immigrated here from, my mom immigrated here from Burma and my dad from Hong Kong. And in Asian culture, at least what I was taught was to keep your head down, stay focused, don't cause a scene, don't speak up. And so I think that narrative also played a big role in why I really didn't know how to interact with the world and show up in the world as who I was. And so it was a very interesting journey for the first, I'd say, first third of my life, where I remember being so shy. And it wasn't until that one moment that changed really my confidence, where I had a teacher in middle school nominate me to be part of this leadership program for this middle school. And I remember being so excited, and I had to be in this public facing kind of role where I had to lead people when they came in and interact. And that brought this level of confidence for me. And it actually made me feel confident in myself and allowed me to try out for a play in middle school and then try out for sports. So I was on the volleyball and basketball team and really just immersed myself in all these social activities. And I'd say that young girl in my house who was always so excited and extroverted, finally, like, I kind of broke out of my shell. And that's what happened for me in that moment. And so from there, I found myself really excited about drama and theater. So in high school, I was part of the drama club and performed on stage. Absolutely loved it. But the interesting thing was, now looking back, I really loved being able to share other people's stories. And so it was a thrill for me, but it was never my own story. And so that kind of became a theme that I had noticed later on in my life, of where I could hide behind other things. And so for me, theater was one way of hiding behind other people's stories. And so anyways, life kind of takes you on this path, and sometimes you never know where it's going to take you. And so you might have a specific plan in mind, your plan A, but oftentimes plan E arrives, and you have to make a decision on how you move around and how you move through it. So I remembered after high school, I was like, you know what, Zanera, I'm gonna move to Irvine, which I did. I went to UC Irvine, and I'm gonna be a theater major. And then eventually, after I graduate, I'm gonna be this, actress on Broadway in the theater. And sure enough, that was my plan A. And so sure enough, I started school at Irvine, and I remembered I was auditioning for all these plays in my first year as a freshman, and zilch, nada. Didn't have any callbacks. I didn't have any roles. And that was a really hard moment for me because I thought I had this big plan and it made me question, am I enough? Am I right for this? And it's very interesting. There became a shift for me where I started to rethink things. And that led me to, well, I know I like being in front of people on the stage, but what happens if I take a step back and step behind the camera? And so that led me to exploring film and telling people stories, which has led me to a career actually in being a video producer and telling other people's stories, which I've loved. But it's so interesting too, where you again have one path in mind and another path you never could have imagined pops up. And so for me, I loved it. I was like, wow, this is such a cool opportunity to be able to tell other people's stories through video, through film. And yet another theme appears, which is the same theme. I loved telling other people's stories, but what about my own? And so we'll kind of arrive there later on in my career. But so I ended up graduating from a film and media studies major instead of a theater major. And basically senior year, I had this grand plan. I was going to move to Los Angeles and become this big time Hollywood film producer. And of course, I graduated in 2009, where it was like the shittiest time in the economy. And I remember sending out, I don't know, 100 resumes a week. Of the hundreds I would send out, I think I maybe only got 2 or 3 emails back in total for about 6 to 8 months. Of course, I had to move back home. And I remember just like scrolling through Facebook at the time, seeing my friends like get their first big time jobs out of college. And here I was unemployed for, I'd say 8 months plus. And I was like really down. I was like depressed. I was like, oh my God, I've moved back at home. I don't have a job. I'm applying, but nothing's happening. So I was in a really bad place back then. And it wasn't until I found the book called The Secret, which really changed everything for me. If you haven't read the book, The Secret, I highly recommend it. But the book basically tells you that if you have a dream, if you want anything in your life, you have to truly believe it. And you have to visualize that and feel the feelings of what it feels like without having it first. And it's a really powerful way of manifesting. So I remembered when I found this book, I had been applying to this job at DreamWorks, which I thought was my dream at the time. And so I'd say for the last several months, I was applying to the same job like every few weeks with the same resume, nothing back. And it wasn't until I read The Secret and I was like, you know what, Zanira, I have nothing to lose. Let's just try it. So that night, I remembered imagining that I was working at DreamWorks, imagining what it felt like to be there, imagining what the office looked like, who I was interacting with, what the role was like. And then I went to bed and I was like, all right, let's just go to bed. The next morning, I get this call from an unknown number. And I had the weirdest feeling where for some reason I knew that this was DreamWorks without even for sure knowing, but it was just this feeling. And I was so terrified to pick up the phone that I didn't. And I was driving to this nonprofit that I was volunteering at and let it go to voicemail because I was so nervous to pick it up. And sure enough, it was DreamWorks, a recruiter from DreamWorks asking to interview me. And so basically, I went through this whole process of interviewing at DreamWorks. And at the same time, I remember seeing Google and YouTube. And at the time, YouTube was like creating all these videos. And that was how people were consuming content. And it really excited me. So I just used the secret principle and applied to Google. And within the same day, a recruiter reached out to me, which is pretty insane because they receive thousands and thousands of applicants. And that very moment, they saw my resume and decided to interview me. And this became this whole process. And I had one of the biggest risks I had taken ever in my career at that time, where I thought my dream was to work at DreamWorks. But as I had met with folks at Google, I realized that I was really excited about the people there and what the company was doing and what they were creating. And I basically had a job offer from DreamWorks, but I wouldn't know from Google whether or not I'd get a job offer until the very next day. And so here I am on the phone with the recruiter and hiring manager at DreamWorks saying, "Hey, do you mind? Can you just wait for like one more day and just wait for one more day? I need to know from Google whether or not I have an offer and I'd like to make a decision." And DreamWorks said, "No, you have to let me know today, right now." And so I kind of went with my gut. And I declined DreamWorks without even knowing I'd have a job offer from Google. And I remember being in Hawaii with my family. I'm like on pins and needles. I can't even enjoy the fact that I'm in a beautiful, beautiful place. And finally, 24 hours later, I got the call from Google saying, "Hey, we want you to work with us." And I was elated, and it led me, that moment just allowed me to see that if you want something in your life, you can make that happen if you truly believe in it. And it's such a powerful, powerful tool that I forget how powerful it is. And I'm only in this place right now, to remember what that is like. And so in my life, I'm trying to practice and bring back this power of manifestation. But in any case, back to more of my story, I have worked at Google and YouTube for about 15 years. So a lot of my role at Google is really telling other people's stories in tech. And so as a video producer, that has been, I spent a majority of my career creating content for either creators at YouTube, creators for YouTube, or for students and developers at Google. And so in thinking about how I really established my voice as who I am today, it really started in the workplace. And I feel like it's not until you experience some of the biggest challenges that you have the opportunity to step into your own voice. There was an incident when I was part of this team. I was very junior at the time, and so I didn't quite know how to handle speaking up, or I didn't know how to challenge a thought or a perspective. And I remembered we were building this video course on this team, and it was a gigantic program. I think our team was tasked with creating 100 videos, and I was a fish out of water. I was very early on in my career, and I remembered there was this more senior woman on my team, and she basically kind of threw me under the bus and just said, "Zanera will do it." And I was not prepared to say yes. I didn't even know about this project. I didn't know. I was really out of my comfort zone, and I was just I was new to the role. And so when this woman in front of my entire team voluntold me, it was not something that my boss and I discussed. She just basically said, "Oh, Zanera can do it." I didn't say anything. And I remember the pain and just the shame of not saying anything at all, but feeling angry and feeling confused, and the not speaking up about it was something that I had to learn from, because I went through a pretty challenging experience there. We won't get into all the details, but that was a moment for me where I look back and wish that I had the confidence and the courage to say, "Actually, I don't know if this makes sense for me to take this on. It sounds like this would be a great fit for you. I can help support, but this doesn't make sense for me to fully take this on," because it ended up not putting me, setting me up for success is really what happened. So that's one story that I remembered, and I also remembered finally years later when I started speaking up more. And that takes time. There's a moment where a challenge or an opportunity is presented to you, and you have the choice of whether or not to speak your truth. And oftentimes, your truth is coming to you through a gut feeling, through this knowing. There's like alarm bells internally where you're like, huh, that wasn't quite right. That doesn't sit well with me. Or, oh no, I think this should be done like this. You have this knowing within you always, and you have this opportunity and this choice to step up and step into your power and your voice. And so my, my takeaway is that if you do have that feeling, if you have an idea, if you have a different perspective, it's the opportunity for you to step into your voice and to speak your truth and share that. Because oftentimes, if you're thinking it and you're saying it, there is probably another person in the room thinking the exact same thing, but they're too scared to do it. But the thing is, once you start speaking up for yourself and sharing more of that idea, you do build more and more of that confidence. And so it took me a while to get there through these challenges and opportunities, these challenges really at work. And I remembered I had always been presented with these similar figures of, I'd say, these bully type figures in the workplace. And I didn't quite know how to interact with that. And years later, same team, different manager at this point. And this manager, I remember this one experience at work that I'll just never forget it. But our team was prepping for this presentation for our director. And I had my slides on lockdown. I was really prepared. I wrote out the slides and felt really confident in what I was presenting. It took a lot of time to do that. And so when I did a run through with our team and my manager at the time, she stopped the presentation and humiliated me, started yelling, raising her voice and saying, "What is this? Why do you have this? Like, this is not," mind you, we're going to present in about 30 minutes to our director. So she wanted to do a run through. And she basically spoke like this to me for a few minutes in front of my entire team, completely uncalled for. And also, it didn't quite make sense. I don't know why she did that. In any case, I didn't say anything at that time because, first of all, I'm floored. And second of all, I'm embarrassed. And third, I'm like, what the hell just happened? This is just not right. I remembered stepping out of the room, didn't say anything. I remember everyone else in the room was also felt uncomfortable. It was really uncomfortable for other people to be in there, not just for me, but for others. And I remembered going into this little phone booth and I just cried my eyes out for 30 minutes because I was like, what the fuck was that? And who do you think you are to be able to say that in front of your entire team and like call someone out like that in an incredibly disrespectful and rude way? So I remembered I was listening to my gut and I was like, this isn't right. I'm going to stand up for myself. In the meantime, I had like 5 more minutes to get ready to present this exact presentation to our director. And I had to pull it together, wiped away all my tears. Here I am, like puffy-eyed, a little bit of like glossy eyes, a little bit red from crying. To pull myself together and walk into the same room with my director, presented the same slides in the same way that I had done in the rehearsal just 30 minutes before. And my director was like, "Zanera, this is fantastic." And I smiled, and inside I was seething. I had so much rage. I was like pissed off because who does that, especially to your own report in front of your own team? That's like ridiculous, first of all. And so I remembered being first of all, I felt like so vindicated that this director basically had told me I did a great job, but also grappling with these feelings of being so upset and so angry at at just being treated so disrespectfully. And so I basically took that day and gathered my thoughts. And then I set a meeting up with my manager for the very next morning. I was like, okay, how do I say this? How do I tell her that this was inappropriate? I went through so many different scenarios and prepping and, talking to people who I trust, who could help kind of guide me through this tough moment. And I remembered in the meeting with my manager one-on-one, I had a very calm tone, a calm demeanor, and I just spoke very succinctly and very calmly to call out her behavior. And I said, hey, I really wanted to talk about what happened yesterday. And she was like, okay. And I shared that when I presented in my time with her for a run through, she basically raised her voice, made inappropriate comments, and was disrespectful to me. And I told her, moving forward, this cannot happen again. If you have feedback for me, I would appreciate if you could tell me one-on-one and not in a group setting. And then I paused. And she was kind of like a little like flustered. And she basically said, Zanera, thank you for letting me know. No one's ever given me feedback before. This is kind of the first time anyone's given me feedback. And I just really appreciate you letting me know. And I said, sure. And we kind of moved on. But I think in that moment, for me, the fact that I had finally listened to my gut and finally listened to what my insides were telling me. They were telling me, this is wrong. This is inappropriate. And even with someone in a position of power, you have to speak up and you have to say something. And in that moment, I didn't know what her reaction was going to be. I was very nervous around that. But for me, it was more about taking the action for myself, really stepping into my own voice, my own truth, and having the courage to speak up changed everything for me. And in that moment, that's where true confidence comes from. And I truly believe that every person has a unique voice and a story, but it doesn't mean that you have to go off and present on a stage or share in a public forum or platform. Sharing your own voice happens in these little moments in your life, at work, in your personal life. It's that time when challenge arrives and it's asking you, do you want to stand up for yourself? Do you want to listen to that gut feeling that's telling you that you should speak up? And so my offer to you is, will you be that person for yourself to rise to the occasion and speak your truth and share your story, whether or not it's a difficult conversation with a manager, with a colleague, with a friend, or maybe it's that moment where you have this exciting idea at work and you're just a little too scared to share it. But what happens if you raise your hand and step up and share your story, share your idea? Those moments, each of these moments count, and they help build your confidence and who you are. And I share the story with you because in having these hard conversations, in these moments that you choose, I've realized that it's helped me really find purpose in the work that I do today. And the work that I do as a public speaking coach is to really help other people find their voices, because this is such a personal mission to me, where I grew up, as you know, being scared of others, being afraid to be who I was and hiding behind a camera or hiding behind a performance of being someone else. And so I feel like those these experiences have led me to this moment of finally stepping into who I am, finally sharing my own truth in different ways. And in doing so, I've been able to find my own voice, and helping other people find their own voice is such a personal mission and purpose for myself. And so it's what I do as a public speaking coach and what I do as a speaker to help people realize that they have a really unique voice and that they can share that with the world. And so on Hand Me the Mic, the purpose of this podcast is really to hear from others. I'm going to be handing the mic to some incredible founders, incredible entrepreneurs, and just incredible people who I admire, who have found their own voice and shared it in different ways and different mediums. And I want you to be inspired so that maybe one day you can find the courage to share your own story. And again, it doesn't have to be on this public stage, but it can be in these moments, like I mentioned, in these moments in your life. And you have a choice. You have a choice to not say anything, ignore it. I've done it. It doesn't feel great. Or you have a choice to step into who you really are by having the courage to say your truth, to share your story, to share your idea, to have that difficult conversation. And I'm just so thrilled for you to join me here. I can't wait for you to hear these stories of these amazing guests. And make sure to subscribe on Hand Me the Mic. And I'll see you soon on the next episode.